was during tax season. I got a call from a longtime EA friend that I've had, and he's like, Arthur, I need your help. Can you give me a call? I'm being audited by the IRS. And I'm like, seriously, during tax season you're being audited? He goes, yeah. He goes, I don't know what's going on. So I gave him a call back. That was the message that he had effectively. And when I called back, he said, yeah, I'm getting audited, and it's something like an e-file audit, or do you have any idea what they're talking about? And I said, yeah, I know exactly what they're talking about. I said, you are being audited by the IRS, and they're going to take some time to come and visit you during your busiest time of season, during tax season, to do kind of a compliance check. At that point in time, he went crazy. He goes, I don't have the time to go through this, which would be my exact response as well. It's like, I've got too many other things to do than be audited and to deal with the IRS and get ready for it. But I told him, effectively, you don't have time not to do it. This is something that's really, really important. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a little bit more of that story and tie that aspect into what the IRS does when they do come to visit. He was experienced as an EA. He's probably prepared in his lifetime more tax returns than I will ever prepare in my lifetime. So he knows how to do the things that he needs to do, but wasn't comfortable with what's going to happen when the IRS comes to visit. And my job was really to kind of walk him through those pieces. And he was complaining as we're going through. He goes, you know, I've been studying for years and years. I've passed the exam. I've taken the continuing education courses. And now they're coming and auditing me. He goes, I mean, this is my livelihood. I mean, what if they find something wrong? And what if they suspend me? What if they, you know, put me in jail? I said, calm down. He goes, I do tax returns for like widows and orphans. I'm a good guy. Why are they doing this to me? And I go, because they want to check compliance. They want to make sure you're doing the things you're supposed to do. So I'm the calm guy. I'm not the guy that got the IRS notification during tax season, because this is in the midst of tax season to do it. I'm the guy that's basically trying to talk him off of the ledge. We had some discussions, and I said, before we go any further, I said, can you tell me what your current procedures are like for your clients you're with now? You know, what do you have in your files? How do you meet them? Where do you meet? How do you gather information? How do you store the information? How do you safeguard the information? As he went through it, I learned more about the way that he does things. He has an office in the home, so he actually meets people sometimes in his kitchen, sometimes at the dining room table, sometimes in the office. It's a busy practice, but it isn't like you have an office, which is what a lot of these rules are basically set up for. I don't know exactly where he stores all the files, but at the same time, that's not my issue, but it could be the IRS's issue, as we'll look at some of these factors as we go forward. So I may be describing your practice as we go through. I know a lot of EAs work out of their home. They have a separate place where they'll prepare the tax returns. As we talked more and more and more about his basic procedure, I said, that's for the current year. So we've kind of got that down. I said, good, because they're going to ask you what your procedures are. Let's talk about historic. You have historic files that they're going to look at as well to make sure that you're in compliance. He then said, I have 300 returns that I do every year. And I said, well, they're going to be looking back over a 3-year period of time and then sample those returns. Out of that sample, if they find infractions or differences from standards, they may expand their sample and look at even more. But basically, they have a 3-year period of time. And they're going to be looking at things. And we talked a little bit about the things that they were going to look at, which includes things such as the Form 8879, which I'll show you in a couple minutes. Do you have the authorization to allow, that the taxpayer has signed, that allow you to e-file their return in file? I don't know if I have them all. I think I have them all. I don't have the time to go through every year and make sure I have them in for 3 years. I said, well, that's what they're going to be looking for, because that's something that you should have been doing. I also said, what about, do you have copies of the W-2s that show withholdings? Do you have copies of any 1099s, like 1099-Rs, that have withholdings as well? Do you have the substitute W-2s, and did you file the compliance for that special form that says I have a non-standard W-2 in my file? Did you do this? Do you have that? He goes, I'm going to have to go back and look at I got to go back and do every one of them. I said, hey, it's up to you. It's going to take some time, But the IRS is going to look, and the more that they find, the more they're going to examine, and the more they examine, the more difficult it becomes. I said, I'm just trying to tell you the facts. I said, I'm not emotionally involved with this thing. I'm just telling you what the Internal Revenue Service is going to do. Do you do any folks that have the Earned Income Tax Credit? He goes, yeah, because I have a number of those people. Do you have the EITC checklist in your file? Do you have it documented? Is it there? I got to go check those. I said, yeah, you have to go check those. And so we started going through all of the different things for him to do. And when it was all said and done, and we had a chance to, again, to kind of walk through what might be involved, and I'm going to be sharing more of this as we go along, just as a point of reference. He realized that he had a big task in front of him, and that is to prepare for an audit, something that, in essence, we should be doing all the time. I started talking to him then about other factors, which are things which always bother me, and that is correspondence with clients. When I correspond with them, it's typically by email. It's not by phone as much as it used to. Frequently, I'll print out an email and I'll put it in the file because it might provide me with maybe an excise tax amount or maybe a confirmation of a real estate tax bill or things like that. But there might be sensitive information that a client sent me that maybe I shouldn't have in my file per se for the IRS to look at. I always have to think in my mind as I put things in the files, would this be something that I would like the IRS to see if they were doing a compliance check of me about my clients? Because this becomes an important aspect of why the IRS is also doing this monitoring or this visitation of electronic filers, and I'll get to that in just a few minutes. What I hope to do during this time period is to give you an idea of what specifically the IRS is looking for. And as we do that, we're going to go actually to the Internal Revenue Service's manual that deals specifically with the electronic return originator, which I believe is you. And I'm going to be also saying what will they be doing with the information that they gather and the findings, and some of the steps that you should be taking during tax season and before tax season to help minimize some of the risks that you might face. Folks, we're in a business, and when I think about the work that I do as a professional tax person, I oftentimes say, I'm doing a return, I'm billing this amount, and this is why I'm billing this amount, because I've spent this much time. But there's also the back end of it as well that people don't realize. Yeah, it might only take me 15 minutes to put all the stuff in and tell somebody what their refund is, but the assembling, the putting the files together, making sure I have all the components in my files, and updating my practice and doing the things I'm supposed to do takes time as well. That's part of my billing process as well. It's not that I bill extra for all of those things. It's just that when I contemplate my billing, there's a lot of administrative work that we as tax professionals need to be continually monitoring and doing. That takes time, and time is money in our business. So we're going to walk through components of the Internal Revenue Manual. I'm going to be talking about things in terms of the types of visits, the things to look for as we go along. But I want to begin with something that we're very comfortable with, and that is some of the forms and some of the publications that should be part of your typical, I'm going to call it your reading list of things to do, both before and during tax season. I want to start with something which I think is quite familiar with you. This is the Form 8879, and it's the IRS e-file authorization. We know that we're supposed to prepare this document, and we know that we're supposed to keep this for our records. We do not send this to the Internal Revenue Service, but we keep it. It provides the taxpayer with a summary of what their AGI is, their total tax, and whether they're going to have a refund or a balance due. If I asked most people what their AGI was, they don't even know what that means, let alone, it's a number that the IRS knows what it is, but most PAC tags don't know. But this is the information that we have to present to them. They then make a declaration that allows us to transfer their information to an outside service provider who then usually files the tax return on our behalf. But this is stuff that I can't believe any of my clients have ever read this, but then it talks about that I authorize Arthur Reed to enter and generate my PIN number, et cetera, and if they're married and file a joint return, they both sign those. But down here is the part that deals with what we do. We have our information that we put in, and it says, I certify that the above entry is my PIN, which is my signature for the tax year 2015, electronically filed income tax return for the taxpayers indicated above. So I'm saying that this is my PIN number. The word my is going to become an important word later on, as people oftentimes share their PINs with people that are not themselves, and that creates another problem. I confirm that I am submitting this return in accordance with the requirements of the PIN method and Publication 1345, which is the handbook for authorized e-file providers for tax returns. And then again, the ERO, which is us, must retain this form, so we have to keep this form in our records. I talk to people that say, I don't keep these records, I just throw them all out after tax season. It's like, dude, that is so wrong, you can't do that. And so what we're going to be looking at is the fact that we have these requirements that every time we sign this thing, we're saying that we're doing it in accordance with the requirements of this and Pub 1345. So if you haven't looked at Pub 1345 in a long time, you've got some work to do. All right. This is Pub 1345. This is the handbook of the authorized e-file providers for individual returns. Just as a piece of information, I'm not going to go through this with you right now, but I'm going to be looking at it periodically as we go through this. This edition, let's see if I can get that a little better. Yeah. This edition of Pub 1345 replaces the previous edition basically from 2009. They do get updated periodically. It continues to address the rules and requirements for participation for filing income tax returns. So you need to make sure you look at this. This publication only runs, I say only, it only goes about 40 some odd pages about the things that we can do and things that we can't do, the things that we're supposed to do, etc. Every time we sign a Form 8879, we're saying that we understand and we're complying with the rules in there, and we don't comply with the rules. Those differences are referred to as infractions. You have infractions, you have problems. I sound like the IRS when I'm doing this. I'm so sorry, I don't mean to, but like this is real stuff. And then here's a document that you have not seen in a very long time, I hope. This is Publication 3112. And this is the IRS e-file application and participation. This publication also comes out relatively new, periodically. They have less pages to read. A lot of the stuff is the same thing that you have in the handbook, but it's sort of like in a slightly different format. So you'll read through and it's like, I understand some of these things because I think I just read them. And what you'll have down here are also things such as monitoring providers, revocation, sanctions, and levels of infractions. This is about the only time you ever find these things in print on this page. But what ends up happening, and I'm just going to show you this and then I'm going to go to something specific, is that this publication also keeps coming up new. So this was last revised in 2009. This is as of today when we're doing the filming to make sure there isn't something brand new. And what we have in this area is the ability to make sure that we stay up to date with what the IRS is doing. This application that we are submitting is an online application, so I couldn't print it out, but I took a look at mine. It's a Form 8633. I have a whole file of all of my correspondence with the IRS pertaining to e-filing, PIN numbers and things like that, CAF numbers, etc. So they're all basically in one place, but that's where that form is. And I went to go online to show you one, but I can't because it's an online form, and you can't access those things. And then just as a final piece of information, one thing I just wanted to suggest to you right here, and this is about staying informed, is that when you deal with the Internal Revenue Service and updates, it's the updates that really get us that we're not always sure that they happen. So how do you know there is an update if you're not informed that there's an update? It's kind of one of those backwards type of rules that, well, I didn't know. Well, over here on this document, so if you go to this publication 1345 and you click on it and open up, there's a link. And all of the things that they suggest that you get updates for small businesses and for guideware, for quick alerts, for newswire, tax tips, filing status type of information. It says subscribe to these at subscription services. You can go online and then get updates directly from the Internal Revenue Service so that when you go and open up your email and you get a letter from the IRS, you don't have to get nervous about it, but they're saying here's something that's changed that you should be aware of. And it's like a really nice free update on the IRS. It's free. Well, nothing's free. There's no additional charge, let's put it that way. So those are some things we're going to be looking at. I'm going to show you the manual in just a moment, but I want to close this area with just one piece of information, and then we'll work through a learning question. When the IRS comes to visit, they don't call them audit, they call them visitations, okay? It's sort of like, hey, I'm going to go visit my grandmother today. You know, it's like, no, it's not one of those at all. But they soften it by calling them visits. There are basically 4 types of visits that they have. One of them is referred to as a referral, one of them is called a follow-up, one of them is called a targeted visit, and the other one's called random. My hope is that if you ever have one of these, it's random. You just simply got selected at random. The last one, called random, used to be called an education visit. They're just coming out, checking general compliance, want to make sure that you understand the rules, thank you for your afternoon or whatever, and they're on their way. But I want to tell you, that's not what it's about. A referral comes when somebody has said something about you to the Internal Revenue Service about your e-filing procedures. Okay? A follow-up is the year after you've been referred to the Internal Revenue Service to make sure you're not doing what you said you weren't doing last year, but you really were doing. So that's a follow-up on the referral. You also have a targeted. That's when you've got some really bad stuff going on, and the IRS specifically targets you to do an audit. Why these are important is that the random audits are typically the ones that you get notification that we're going to do an audit in a couple weeks. The referral, the follow-up, and the targeted, so they can just show up and do the audit right then. That's wicked scary. So with this, let's take a minute and do your first learning question.